Welcome to Success Authority's Conversation Street with Leadership Authority Peter Beaumont and with Business Culture Authority Ronn Lehmann and me, Linda Ruhland, Success Authority's founder.
Do you think that people make a conscious choice one way or the other when they first enter a business?
No,
I don't think they do. I think they have an idea for a product or a service, or there's something that they want to do. I mean, I just saw somebody over the weekend who is kind of an entrepreneur and trying to start this business, but she's now thinking about the business part of it. What she was thinking about in the beginning was this product she's creating.
yeah,
That's what she was focused on. And now it's like, oh, how do I bring this to the world? How do I sell this? And she wasn't thinking about that going in. But I'm sure there are people who think about the business first and then figure out, well, here's I know all the marketing, I know how to do this. Now we just need something to market. So I think it's both ways.
I think most businesses do that. They just start with a great idea, and then and if they survive, like only 20% do after 5 years, then they start thinking about, how do I want this to look like? How big do I want to hire people, or do I just stay on my own with a couple of buddies, or is it a family thing? Or wait a minute, I could be onto something here, make a lot of money. One way, I could be onto something here, make a lot of money, and sell it and make even more money. So you got a decision tree type thing that goes on after. But I think people are heads down for the first. Don't even give a thought to that for the first 5, 7, 8 years.
I think that's true in most. I think a lot of times that's how people, including me, live. It's less conscious than it could be.
I agree.
We're making decisions based on the urgency or what's right in front of us, but not really thinking, what's the bigger picture? What does this serve?
It's the same.
Where do I want to end up?
It's the same in careers, right?
True.
Yes.
True. You start in one direction, and then all of a sudden you find yourself by accident or connection in some entirely different place.
That because it's working, and others you take another direction because it's not.
Mm-hmm. Or you come, it works, and then you come to a choice point, and you, for whatever reason, you're at a place to be more thoughtful about it,
right? And
say, so which way does this way lead, and which way does this way lead? And typically there's like 5 ways.
Yep.
It's not just 2. It's not the crossroads. It's, my God, there's like all these different ways. And I know in my business for years, people have said, it's really important to be known for one thing, get really focused, and that makes it easier to buy and easier to engage with people. And I have unconsciously resisted that because I'm just curious that it goes in a lot of different directions, and no matter whatever I do, I'm sort of at some point want to do something else. Not way out of what I do, but it's just like, okay, focus on this part. Well, no, what about this part? And then I could do this part. And I think early on that was driven by opportunity. It was somebody wants me to do something, and I said yes. And now I'm being, I think, a little more thoughtful about what do I want, what interests me and what can I bring some energy to. And I think that's a small version of what every business person goes through.
I agree.
And I would just say, the sooner, had I been more consciously choosing earlier on, things might have turned out, I don't know if they'd be better, but they'd be different. But, as we like to say, this is how I've turned out so far.
It's a tough one, though. This going niche. I mean, I've been in and out of that niche thing, and finally I did go niche thanks to really EOS. But it's really a tough one. But I think what I'm hearing and thinking myself while we have this discussion is, because you said it just now, and I alluded to it earlier, this whole thing is a set of decisions we make, and you can probably boil it down to 4 or 5 that a business is going to take once they reach a certain stage. And it was some of those I described. Is it always just about money? Am I going to stay niche? Am I going to expand and acquire other? But what am I doing it for? What's the end goal? Is it to make money, or is it to bequeath it, or is it just because I really enjoy doing it? So,
I had a client once say this line that I have, just beaten to death for 25 years, but it was, what does finished look like?
Yeah.
And she would ask that at the beginning of every meeting, every project. What does finished look like? Or every conversation. It's like, where are we going? And I found that to be really helpful to say, here's the goal. But, something you said, Peter, just struck me, that I think it's never a clear line from startup to growth and then through growth. And depending on the number of turns and twists and turns and stumbles and restarts that you've done, I think that almost reinforces that making decisions as quickly as possible or without a real goal, like this isn't working, so we'll do this, as opposed to saying, what are we trying to accomplish? And I think the sooner that we are conscious about that, the better.
Yeah.
But if, it would have been great to be asking all these questions right at the beginning, but the next best time is right now. It's like now, wherever we are. I'm a big fan of consciousness. I just think every time we really take a few, at the risk of sounding like you have to spend, 2 weeks on an island thinking about it, you don't. You need to just take sometimes 5 minutes to just say, where do I want this to go, and what's my likely path? And I think that's the challenge for any leader who's, especially in the startup phase, they're busy and they're doing things and trying things and scrambling, and to then step back and take a deep breath is important and difficult to do, I think, sometimes.
Yeah, I think you're right, because a lot of the clients I've worked with on EOS, they needed it because they had no. We made some assumptions at the resultants that every business owner had a vision and they wanted to get, and what was preventing them to get there? I learned very quickly that most business owners don't have a vision. Right? Yeah. They're doing exactly what you described, Ron. It's one step in front of another.
Yeah, get through today.
Yeah, which is what that client is like that you've introduced us to, Linda, and we had a discussion with. Yeah. That's all that we're trying to do. They're trying to get through from 1 hour to the next, let alone day to day. Right. And then untypical of a lot of businesses,
Yeah, I think it's, you get so busy plugging the holes in the boat that you don't really say, which way are we headed here? Yes. I mean, are we just kind of floating around?
Or even, I'm not sure I want this bloody boat.
Well, yeah, that's an even bigger one. It's like, maybe it's time to sell. But, right. But Linda, you've had a varied career. What's your experience been as you think about yourself in that role?
Well, if I look back and say, could I have ever imagined myself in this position, let's just say fresh out of college? No, I think experience brings a great deal into the mix. We change. Everything that we encounter changes us. But at the same time, our decisions are what carves out whatever it is that we produce, whether you want to call that a legacy business, a business, or a lifestyle business. It's the decisions that we make. And I know that the decisions that I've made, either informed or ill-informed, have really shaped what business turned out for me to be, the ups and the downs. Mm-hmm. I think that the biggest mistake, if I look back at things, was to say that this picture that's out in the distance needs to have some more time spent before I go there. I've got to try A, B, and C first because it'll be easier to get there. Or and I keep hearing this one, if I start small and if I do things right, it'll grow into the thing that I imagine. And I have never seen any evidence of that to be true. And so
That's very telling. I think that is accurate.
I like your "what does finished look like" statement for that reason, because unless we can see the end result in our mind, the destination is nothing but a blur.
Yeah, I mean, as you were saying that, I just thought, I don't think, I mean, I remember you used to read about, 5-year plans, and the Japanese at one time were doing 50-year plans. And I thought, I don't do that at all. I mean, I had a really short timeline, and part of that was I didn't spend a lot of time early on thinking about where do I want to end up. It was more, what do I want to do today or tomorrow, or what's the opportunity today or tomorrow? It was not, I wasn't making a conscious decision based on a vision because I didn't spend any time doing that. And you're right. I mean, every decision you make twists and turns, and I don't think I would trade much of it. It's been all invaluable because I think I've learned through those experiences more than I would have if I'd have set out. But it would be, I think it's an interesting conversation to have with business owners to talk about. When you started, what were you thinking about? What was the goal? How many? Because I suspect most don't have a long-term plan.
No.
Otherwise, the first thing we do when we graduated from high school is fill out a will.
Yeah, true.
But
no, we don't. And as I said, it's the same analogy with careers. People don't come out of, I mean, by the way, the long-term planning stops pretty much after university. I mean, because the goal is to get 3 exams, go to university, and then it kind of, now what?
Well, that's a little side trip here. I'm fascinated by, it seems like younger people are much earlier on in life setting on a path towards a specific job. So in middle school or high school, they're doing things that will prepare them to go to law school or prepare to do something. And when I went to university, I found that the experience was to try a lot of different things and take all these different classes and figure out, gee, I'll take this. Gee, I hate that. I'm not doing that. I have no interest in that. But it seems like now there's a pressure to get set on a path and stay on that path.
So you've just said it, pressure. I was just going to say, is it their choice or somebody else's choice?
Yes.
Well, they certainly seem to get a lot of reinforcement for the ideas. You've got to make decisions when you're 13 for the next 20 years.
So I agree. And here's what I think is happening. The cost of education is so high now in this country that we are seeing, I think you may have heard me say this before, we're getting kids moved out of soccer because there's no such thing as a soccer scholarship. So they're being moved into other sports. The driving force behind that is they may stand a 0.1% chance of getting a scholarship to erode the cost of their education. And so the decisions being made, I agree with you, but the reason I think is because of the cost and parents going, shit, we're looking at 35 grand in state, 45 to 50 to 60 out such state. What's a way that we can, and so they're making these decisions early for kids who don't necessarily buy in.
Yeah. And so much of it seems to be driven too by having more choices of colleges or programs I mean, but just the cost. I mean, when I started, it was $1,000 a year for tuition and books. And, I lived at home, so it was a commuter college, so I didn't have that expense, but I could fool around and try a lot of things. But if you're paying $45,000, you can't take a geology class because you might be interested in rocks.
Yeah.
You have to stay on this trail, and I think that's unfortunate because I found the advantage of a big school was they offered everything, and I could try. I recently and troublingly came across my transcript. And the first 2 years, I mean, there's no path at all. It's like, well, he's just throwing a dart at the course books and just picking one because it's all over the map and with grades to match. But it's so, I just imagine, so maybe they're set on this path to do something, and then they, get an idea to start a business, but their whole pathway has been going somewhere else. That must be a very difficult and courageous decision to make after spending all that money.
Yeah.
And I just recently heard some statistics about the payoff for that in terms of lifetime earnings. And it's kind of all over the map. Some schools, it's a great payoff. Others, it isn't. But, my doctor mentioned once how, you go through all the med school and everything. And the idea is, well, you're a doctor, so you're just going to be floating in money. And then the healthcare industry changes, and it's like, there's, I think his example was a plumber, probably makes more money than he does.
Well, there's something to be said about that, because, on the flip side of this cost of higher education, there is this employment shortage, and there are a tremendous amount of vocational jobs available that will bring people in at zero experience and bring them up, train them into whatever their vacancy requires. And a lot of young people are looking at that and choosing that pathway. And I'm not saying that that's the path that they're going to stay in, but that may be our future employer. That may be our future business owner when and if that person finally says, enough of this, I've got my own ideas. So once again, we've got these people coming from very diverse experiences with who knows what shaping the business to come.
Yeah. And futurists are always telling us that, 50% of the jobs that will be available in 10 years don't exist today. So when you set off on a 10-year plan, I don't think anyone's even aiming at those jobs, because who knows what they are. And I was with a group of construction folks last week, and they were all talking about the lack of skilled trades. You can't find carpenters, and if you've got a young person who's not sure what to do, I say become a welder, because they are in such demand, and they can write their own ticket pretty much. And but it's so, I mean, even going into it, you've got all kinds of barriers to the stuff we're talking about, of being, saying, really, what do I want to create? Or do I want all this stuff I'm doing to pay? What's the payoff for that personally?
There's a 23-year-old welder that I know of through one of the clients. He's earning 130,000 a year at 23. So it's just going to keep going up and up.
And a lot of times they have enormous flexibility, because if a lot of them just work contract for organizations that don't need necessarily a full-time welder, but they bring them in on projects. So they're jumping around. They get to see a lot of different things. And if they're good at it, everybody wants them. And so they have a pretty high earning potential to do that. But you got to like to weld too.
So what we're talking about really is market. And what is the market hungry for? What is the next best thing that's happening out there that we can chase down? And again, it's short term in comparison to something you might want to call a legacy company. But is that the best way to proceed? And obviously, market demands and shapes so much of what we do. Obviously, there's a big part of what we end up creating and crafting our companies around that has to do with the current market. So is that the best way to proceed?
I have to say I'm of two minds of that. I mean, on the one hand, I think you do have to be aware of the market for now, but I think the real opportunities lie in seeing what's not there that could be created. or, seeing the invisible market that is there. But there's a lot of examples of people who started companies that people looked at and went, "You're crazy." I mean, who would want that? One of my favorite examples is a guy that I worked with who was one of his jobs in his early career was selling ATMs to banks, and they were brand new at the time. And going into a bank and convincing them that it'd be a great idea to have an automated teller. And nobody in the banking industry was looking at that as an opportunity. They went, "Why would we do that? Who would want to do that rather than talk to a real live teller?" And nobody, banks didn't create ATMs. That was done by a technology company.
Right.
And said, "Hey, here's a use." Well, and it's the same with, I think that happens all the time. And not just technology, it could be a service that doesn't exist, and now we can't live without it. I was just talking to an Uber driver and saying, 5 years ago, ride sharing had never occurred to me. And now it's like, I just use it all the time. So, but whoever did that probably didn't go around and talk to people and say, "What do you need?" In fact, there's a story about the guy from Callaway Golf who was the first one to invent the driver with the giant head. And they asked him, "How much, research did you talk to golfers?" And he goes, "Well, yeah, but," he said, "nobody would say, you know what I want? I want a club that's got a head the size of a toaster. That's what I'm really looking for." So what they told me is, "I want to hit it straighter and farther without taking lessons." That's what they want. They wanted a club that would fix their swing problems. And he said, in a way, you can get trapped if you wait for the customers to tell you what they want.
Yeah.
Because sometimes they don't know. They don't know the solution.
Yeah.
They know what they want, but they don't know the solution. And you have to sort of present that.
Well, that was Steve Jobs' trick, right? Hence the 1,000 songs in your pocket, which nobody knew that they would want. And suddenly it was used. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's and again, you have to be aware of what's in the market or what's not in the market at the same time. But I'd be curious to talk to people doing startups, is to say, how did you, what did you think the need was? Or was this just something, a lot of times it's just something that somebody really wants to do, and they just hope that the market shows up.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Conversation Street. For more information or to schedule a private conversation with Success Authorities, email us at inquire@successauthorities.com.